Welcome back, everyone. Now, you probably haven't thought about handedness since you were a kid. You'd meet someone on the playground and you'd be like, well, are you right-handed or are you left-handed? And they would be like, oh, I'm right-handed. And you'd be like, whoa, crazy, because that's what mattered when you were 7. And you probably haven't given it a whole lot of thought since then, unless you're left-handed, because in your day-to-day life, you're probably finding that you are just annoyed by little things all of the time. Things are just kind of awkward a lot. These nuisances also translate over to the technology that we use on a daily basis. And it's been bothering me a little bit more and more lately. And so I've been thinking about it and processing about it. And I've realized how much of our technology is developed for right-handed people primarily. And if we look into why that is, we kind of have to go back in time and look at the history of handedness itself. Handedness is thought of as a spectrum, but there are these 4 major categories that everyone really falls into. You have right-handedness, left-handedness, cross-dominance, and ambidexterity. The most common of these being right-handedness. Now, about 90% of the world's population are right-handed, with about 60% of the world's population being strongly right-handed, where you do all of your skills with your right hand only. Then you have left-handedness, which covers about 10 to 12% of the world's population, depending on the study you're looking at, and about 3% of people who are strongly left-handed. From there, we have cross-dominance, where for some skills, you're dominant with one hand, but for other skills, you're dominant with the other. This covers about 1% of the world's population. And then lastly, we have ambidexterity, which is having equal amount of skill for all skills in both hands. This is probably the rarest and still around 1% of the population. As for me, I am personally cross-dominant. I do all of my fine motor skills with my left hand, so that's eating, cutting, writing, etc. And I do all of my power skills with my right hand, so throwing, kicking, stuff like that. I've only met a couple of people in my life who have the same form of cross-dominance that I do. I think that being cross-dominant helps me avoid some of the annoyances that left-handed people have to go through, but I still do have plenty in my day-to-day life. While in our modern society, left-handedness is more of a day-to-day inconvenience, that hasn't always been the case. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church would accuse left-handers as people who consorted with the devil, and in the Inquisition and witch hunts of the 15th and 16th century, left-handedness would be cause enough to identify a woman as a witch and therefore lead to execution. As late as the 1960s and 1970s, Catholic school teachers in particular would routinely inflict corporal punishment and psychological pressure on left-handed students, ranging from accusations to being in cahoots with the devil to, strangely enough, being communist. Now today, left-handers are not directly punished or oppressed in any way, and teachers aren't going to force you to write left-handed in school, but left-handed people are punished through the use of design for the majority, right-handed people. A lot of these are classic, and you've probably heard about them even if you're right-handed. We're talking scissors, can openers, ballpoint pens, notebooks, binders. These all lend themselves to being right-handed.
One so proud, feel the wrath of the left hand burn.
But modern tech has also continued this trend, sometimes in subtle ways, but others much more blatantly. Looking at your traditional computer inputs, the most glaring example is the modern mouse. Yes, left-handed mice exist, and many mice can be set up with software to be used left-handed, and with the advent of Bluetooth, it makes it much easier to put your mouse anywhere you want in your desk, but many mice are just designed to be used in the right hand. You could get a left-handed setup for your own home, but if you're left-handed, you've probably already had to get used to right-handed mice, because anywhere you go outside of your house that you interact with a computer, you're probably using a right-handed mouse. Keyboards are also designed for right-handed people, and you might be thinking, what do you mean I use both hands on the keyboard? But the number pad and the directional pad are both on the right end of the keyboard. Again, you could buy a separate number pad to use in the left hand and mouse pad in the right, but unless you never touch a keyboard outside your own home, this year that might be true, you're gonna run into this. And how about cameras? Every handheld camera is designed to be used with your right hand, from releasing the shutter to changing settings on the dials. If you're operating a camera with one hand, it has to be your right hand and there's no way around it. And from a manufacturer's point of view, I get it. How expensive would it be to design and produce a camera that has a body setup mirrored from normal for a fraction of the population, all of whom have gotten used to using cameras with their right hand? The only exception I could find while doing research for this was the Exacta XV, an old film camera that has its shutter release on the left side, but I don't think that was intentionally designed to cater to left-handed people. Regardless, I think a left-handed point and shoot or something of the sort would be really exciting, and I would love to give it a try if something like that ever turned up. Let's jump to some more subtle design choices. Look at your smartphone right now. Which side is the lock button on? That's right, it's the right side of the phone. This makes it really easy for right-handers to reach up and tap the lock button with their thumb, but left-handers have to crank their wrist around and grab the lock button with their pointer finger if they want to turn the display off. The bigger the phone, the more annoying this is. Yes, I use my left hand on my phone, and yes, I use an iPhone 12 Pro Max. Same situation on my iPad Pro. The lock button and the volume rockers are both on the right side when I hold this in portrait mode. It's much less of an issue because it's pretty rare that you're holding your iPad with one hand, so it makes it much easier to reach up and tap the buttons. But this was a design choice that Apple made. However, in landscape mode, if you hold your iPad the correct way, there is a correct way, and I will die on this hill. The buttons are near your left hand, so there is a bit of a consolation prize in that. Different manufacturers make different products with different design choices, and I think that Samsung is the company I've noticed that makes the most design choices that go against comfort for left-handers. If you look at nearly every single Android phone that had a fingerprint reader on the back of the phone, you'll see that they're always centered on the phone, so it's equally easy for left-handers and right-handers to reach the reader. If we look back at the Galaxy S8, this bucked the trend of center-placed fingerprint readers and put the fingerprint reader to the right side of the camera. Now, if you're left-handed, that means you're dragging your finger across the camera to get to that fingerprint reader, and I don't think I have to explain how annoying that is. And let's look at the Note series. For a phone whose main feature was a stylus to write with, it's frustrating that the stylus has always been positioned on the right side of the phone, making it hard to get to with just your left hand. Oddly enough, the Galaxy Note 20 changed that this year and put the S Pen on the left side of the phone. This design choice probably wasn't intentional for left-handers, but this is one of those phones that I could actually see a left-handed and right-handed model, seeing as the main selling point is a stylus to write with your hands. If I dug through every single piece of tech I've ever used, I could find tons more examples of things that are really set up for right-handed people only. But I do want to give a shout out to apps like Lightroom Mobile and Procreate that have left-handed software modes. Obviously, this is a lot easier to do than a left-handed hardware mode. You only have to move around UI elements instead of physical objects. But it's nice that they have left-handed users in mind. And on Android, there are some software settings hidden deep into the developer settings that can help make the phone a little bit more friendly to left-handed people. So what is the takeaway? Do we rebel and start our own left-handed only tech company? Do we make the Apple Store meets Leftorium? No. I don't feel oppressed as a left-hander. I just feel mildly inconvenienced a lot of the time. I don't expect shifts in product development for 1/10 of the population to be catered to, especially as most of us have already gotten used to right-handed products and are getting along just fine. But anyways, those are my thoughts. If you are a right-handed person, maybe you learned a thing or two today. And if you're left-handed, maybe you just relate to a couple of the experiences that I've had. But anyways, I just wanted to share that with you. If you enjoyed, drop a comment, do the stuff. Don't really care. Just, I love the support, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.